Amazon Seed Heist. This is a story about a theft, but not of gold, not of jewels. This was a heist of something far more valuable, something alive. It was the theft of a secret, a biological key that would unlock the modern world, and in doing so, condemn its original guardians to oblivion. In the late 19th century, the world was hungry. Not for food, but for progress. The Industrial Revolution was screaming into high gear, and its machinery, its factories, and its ambitions all depended on a miraculous substance, a bouncy, resilient material that could seal, stretch, and absorb shock like nothing else on Earth. That substance was rubber, and it came from one place and one place only, the deep, sweltering heart of the Amazon rainforest. Brazil held the world in a stranglehold. It possessed a global monopoly on the tree, the single best source of natural rubber. This wasn't just a trade advantage, it was a national treasure, a source of immense wealth that built opulent opera houses in the middle of the jungle. The city of Manaus, 1,000 miles from the ocean, glittered with European electricity and extravagance, all paid for by the milky white latex bled from the forest's veins. To protect this monopoly, Brazil enacted draconian laws. The exportation of rubber seeds was forbidden, an act of economic treason punishable by death. The Amazon was a fortress, its greatest treasure locked away by law, by geography, and by the sheer intimidating scale of the jungle itself. But empires don't respect fortresses, and the British Empire, the largest the world had ever known, was growing impatient. It needed rubber for its navy, for its factories, for the coming age of the automobile. It could not and would not remain dependent on a single foreign source. It needed its own supply. All it needed was a thief. Enter Henry Wickham. Wickham was not a master criminal in the traditional sense. He was a British planter-explorer, an adventurer with a gentleman's air and a hustler's ambition. He had spent years in the Amazon, trying and failing to make his fortune. He knew the jungle, he knew the rivers, and he knew the immense value of the seeds everyone else was forbidden to touch. He saw an opportunity not just for wealth, but for imperial glory. The official story, the one Wickham would tell for the rest of his life, was one of clever happenstance. But history suggests a more coordinated effort, a quiet conspiracy between a man on the ground and the highest echelons of the British establishment. Joseph Hooker, the director of the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew in London, had a vested interest in economic botany, the practice of acquiring and transplanting valuable plants around the empire to secure resources. It's highly likely Wickham wasn't just a rogue agent. He was an asset, a man encouraged to do what the empire couldn't officially sanction. His mission was clear: break the monopoly, steal the future. In 1876, the plan went into motion. Under the guise of collecting botanical specimens for Queen Victoria, a brilliant and almost unimpeachable cover story, Wickham ventured deep into the Santarém region of Brazil, an area famed for its high-quality rubber trees. He didn't just grab a few seeds. He understood the stakes. He knew that for this to work, he needed a critical mass, a genetic foundation for a new industry. He hired local indigenous laborers, the very people whose lives were intertwined with these trees, to help him gather the seeds. Day after day, they collected the small, mottled seeds as they fell from the giant trees. They filled basket after basket, unaware they were gathering the instruments of their own economic downfall. Wickham was meticulous. He amassed a staggering 70,000 seeds, carefully drying them between layers of banana leaves to prevent them from rotting in the suffocating humidity. Now came the most dangerous part, the escape. Wickham learned of a British steamship, the SS Amazonas, anchored in the port city of Belém, preparing for its voyage back to Liverpool. It was an audacious, all-or-nothing gamble. He chartered the ship, loaded his precious, illicit cargo, and prepared to sail. But first, he had to get past the Brazilian customs authority. This was the moment the entire enterprise could have collapsed, ending with Wickham in a Brazilian prison or worse. As the customs officials came aboard, Wickham, with his characteristic charm and bravado, put on the performance of a lifetime. He presented his cargo not as world-changing seeds of a protected species, but as exceedingly delicate botanical specimens for delivery to Her Britannic Majesty's Royal Gardens at Kew. He played the part of the eccentric English botanist perfectly. The officials, perhaps impressed by the royal destination, perhaps simply outwitted, waved him through. The anchor was raised. The SS Amazonas steamed out of the Amazon Delta and into the open Atlantic. Those 70,000 seeds, hidden in plain sight, had escaped. They were more than just potential trees. They were a weapon of economic warfare, and this single act of biological theft was about to redraw the map of global power forever. Empire of Rubber. The journey of the 70,000 seeds did not end when the SS Amazonas docked in Liverpool. In fact, the most critical phase had just begun. The seeds were rushed by special train to London, to the one place on Earth with the expertise to turn this botanical contraband into a global empire, the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew. Here, under the watchful eye of Joseph Hooker, the world's leading botanists faced a frantic race against time. Hevia brasilensian seeds are notoriously fragile. They lose their viability within weeks. The humid, carefully controlled atmosphere of Kew's tropical glasshouses became an operating theater for an unprecedented agricultural experiment. The botanists worked tirelessly. Of the 70,000 seeds that began the journey, only about 2,700, less than 4%, germinated. It was a tiny fraction, but it was enough. It was the genetic beachhead the British Empire needed. These precious few saplings were the Adam and Eve of a new world order for rubber. But Britain's cold, damp climate was no place for a tropical tree. The plan was never to grow rubber in England. The plan was to use the empire itself as a giant distributed farm. Kew Gardens was the laboratory. The colonies were the factory floor. The saplings were carefully packed in Wardian cases, miniature portable greenhouses, and dispatched to the crown jewel of British Asia, Ceylon, what we now know as Sri Lanka. This is where the true genius and ruthlessness of the imperial system became clear. What happened in Ceylon and soon after in Malaya was the replacement of one ecosystem with another. The wild, chaotic, and diverse Amazon rainforest was replaced by the rigid, orderly, and monotonous logic of the plantation. Gone were the days of, or rubber tappers, hacking paths through dense jungle to find scattered trees. Here, the rubber trees were planted in perfect, endless rows, a living factory optimized for maximum yield. This was the industrialization of nature itself. British botanists like Henry Ridley, stationed in Singapore, perfected the cultivation. Ridley championed the herringbone method of tapping, a far more efficient and sustainable way of extracting latex than the destructive methods often used in the Amazon. This scientific approach, combined with a vast and often exploited labor force brought in from India and China, created an agricultural juggernaut. The results were staggering. The Amazon, with its wild trees, could never compete with the sheer efficiency of the Asian plantations. Within a few short decades, the world's rubber supply flipped. By the early 20th century, British Malaya had single-handedly surpassed Brazil as the world's leading producer of rubber. The Amazonian monopoly was not just broken, it was shattered, utterly and irrevocably. The price of rubber, once a luxury commodity, plummeted. This collapse in price, driven by the massive new supply, is what truly fueled the modern age. Suddenly, rubber was cheap. It was abundant. It could be used for everything. The burgeoning automobile industry, led by Henry Ford and his Model T, was entirely dependent on it for tires, hoses, and seals. The world began to roll forward on stolen seeds. It became essential for electrical insulation, for medical supplies like surgical gloves and catheters, and for military equipment that would define the conflicts of the 20th century. The wealth this generated was astronomical, but it flowed not to the Amazon, but to London, to British corporations, and to the colonial administrators in Southeast Asia. An empire of rubber had been built, a testament to British foresight, scientific prowess, and industrial might. It was a story they would tell with pride, a story of innovation and progress. But this new world, humming with rubber-cushioned efficiency, was built on a foundation of silence. A silence that concealed a terrible human cost. To understand the empire, we must now confront the ghosts it created, the people it erased.